James chapter 5 begins with the same phrase he used in chapter 4, verse 13. Now listen. It means you know better than this. The vivid picture James is painting here is warning us about the evils of riches. And it's not a new revelation. James is giving us a clear reminder about the priorities of our life. Look at James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. The corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. You see, the trouble with preaching through a book of the Bible like I do is this. Sometimes you run across a text you would rather not preach. Today is one of those times. I have always approached preaching about money with fear and trembling for two reasons. First, being a paid minister, I always feel a little self-conscious about asking people to give more. And secondly, I am not always a wise manager of my own money, so it is difficult to try and tell you how to manage your own. However, we cannot ignore these verses, nor can we put aside the many other times money, wealth, and riches are mentioned in the Bible. And we cannot dismiss James chapter 5 as being for the other guy. Not too many of us will consider ourselves to be rich people, as verse 1 says, and most of us are not completely responsible for the hiring, firing, paying, and setting of wages like the people described in verse 4 are. So, what do these words have to do with us? These 6 verses begin to make more sense when we realize James is not just talking about money, but about what we do with all we have. You remember the first 4 chapters, where James talked about our lifestyle and our attitude as Christians. He does not change his theme here. You see, he is not just telling us the rich have an obligation to the poor, although they do. If that was all the text said, we could shake our heads in agreement and go home untouched and unchanged by the Word of God. The message of James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6, is deeper than condemning rich people. It is also about our own attitude toward what we do have. And the first attitude James addresses is the attitude of savings. On the old TV show MASH, there was an episode where Hawkeye and Trapper decided they needed an incubator at their mobile army hospital. The purpose of the incubator was to grow bacteria cultures that could help the doctors save the lives of their wounded patients. So our heroes soon discovered they could not get an incubator through the proper channels because an incubator was not on the list of recommended supplies for a MASH unit. So Hawkeye and Trapper set out to find one on their own. It wasn't long before they came across a supply sergeant who had not one, but 2 incubators in his warehouse. However, the soldier was not about to give up the machine. They argued he had 2 and both of them just sat in their boxes unused. They asked, "You have 2, so why can't we have 1? Because, he answered, if I give you 1, I will no longer have 2. Don't misunderstand. There is some wisdom to saving for a rainy day, and it is good to have a nest egg to fall back on in hard times. But it is foolish to hold on too tight to that which we cannot keep. There were 3 things which showed your wealth in the first century culture James wrote to. First, there were the crops you raised. The man whose barns were filled with grain was indeed rich. He could buy and have whatever he wanted with the food he stored away. Next, your wealth was seen by the clothes you wore. Even today, we make a judgment call about a person's wealth based on the style and appearance of their clothes. Finally, your wealth was seen in Bible days, as it is today, by the money you have. Notice verses 2 and 3 again. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. James reminds us that corn and wheat get rotten. Our clothes, no matter how well made, will wear out. and can become moth-eaten. And our money, although it might not actually rust, can become worthless. Did you know the life expectancy of a $1 bill is 6 months? Yet we work so hard to get as many of them as possible. All of these things, crops, clothes, and coins, are temporary at best. They might be important to us now, but in the long run they mean very little, and it can change so quickly. And you know, in pre-World War II Germany, the economy was so bad and money so worthless, it took literally a wheelbarrow full of money just to buy a loaf of bread. So what are we saving for? Is it for security, or so we can have something later on? Or do we save just so we can have? When I bought my Pontiac Transport, I treated it as my most important possession. I washed it once a week, waxed it once a month, I changed the oil every 3,000 miles, I made sure every part was functioning properly, and I even cleaned out the garage, which hadn't been used for years, to store the minivan. Funny thing though, a month after I made my final payment, the engine blew, and my Pontiac Transport became worthless. The last part of verse 3 says, "You have hoarded wealth in the last days." Do you see the sarcasm in that sentence? It's like buying a winter coat for a trip to the Bahamas. It's not only silly, but worthless as well. Ron Oster played baseball for the Cincinnati Reds in the 1980s. In 1990, after they clinched the World Series, he announced his retirement from the game. He was only 34. Now, Ron was never an all-star, and in his last year he played only a backup role for the team. There were also rumors of a trade. Now, he could have continued to play for a few more years, maybe for several different teams, sometimes starting, sometimes backup. He could continue to make the big money of Major League Baseball for several years, but he decided instead it was time to retire. He said, in effect, there are more important things in life than baseball, and now for the first time I can be with my wife and kids in the summer. What is James telling us? To close out our savings account and forget about our investments? No. Money and material possessions are needed. We have to eat and dress and have a place to live. We need to have the money to pay for our children's education. We like the security of a roof over our heads, and we not only need a car for transportation, we need to be able to keep it in good repair. The danger with savings is that savings can become an end in itself. You see, there's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with having nice things. But are these things all we live for? James is reminding us of the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Well, the second attitude in our text is that of stinginess. Stinginess. For a while, back in the 1980s, I worked at the Lazy Boy furniture store in Champaign, Illinois. We were paid by salary and commission. The salary was just enough to buy groceries. I was dependent on my wife's income and my commission to pay the rest of my bills, including my house payment, and to have any money for anything else I wanted to do. So I figured up the average price of a chair and how much commission I would receive for that average price, and realized I needed to sell roughly 20 chairs a month in order to pay my bills. It felt daunting at first, but I soon discovered I could sell 20 chairs on one good Saturday rather. I had not been there very long when we had this big no sales taxes sale. All furniture would be sold without the customer having to pay the sales tax. And we had a great day. I sold around 30 chairs that day alone, not counting the sofas and other furnishings I sold. But when the commission check came, the amount was far less than I expected. I called up the owner and asked why. He told me the taxes for what I sold had to be paid some way, so he took it out of our commissions. The result was, instead of making about $500 for that one day of work, I made about $100. Of course, my suffering is nothing like the nightmare of a day worker in the first century. Notice verse 4 again. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. There were men who gathered early each morning before dawn and waited for the landowners or their field supervisors to come to town and hire them to work their fields. Jesus describes this career in his parable about the workers in the vineyard in Matthew chapter 20. You see, these workers literally lived day to day. They might wait all day for someone to choose them to work, and if they were not chosen, they would not be paid. They would not eat. The inequity of the system was the boss paid the workers at the end of the day whatever he wanted to pay. And there was no recourse if the worker felt cheated or not treated fairly. Usually the laborer toiled 12 to 14 hours just to make enough money so his family could eat that evening. If the landowner decided not to pay, there was nothing the worker could do but go home and hope for a better day tomorrow. Well, the corruption of this system is obvious. The evil boss could hire more men than he planned to pay, or give the workers only a part of what he promised to pay. The owner might see this stinginess as good business and a good deal, but James describes it as a horrible sin. This attitude does not sit well with God. Verse 6, you have condemned and murdered the innocent one who is not opposing you. Notice the money withheld rightfully belongs to the worker. This is not a matter of a free handout. The owner kept the money knowing full well the pain it could cause the workers. It's a reminder to us of what James wrote earlier in chapter 4, verse 17, when he said, anyone then who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, sins. This is where the text can, according to the old saying, go beyond preaching and start to meddle. The stinginess James condemns, you see, has nothing to do with the refusal to get a new large-screen TV or keeping the 20-year-old car because it still runs, sort of. And it has nothing to do with wearing old clothes bought at a second-hand store, or hand-me-downs, or taking sandwiches to the ballpark instead of paying $10 for a hot dog. It has to do with our attitude toward others. The North American Christian Convention was the largest gathering of independent Christian churches like us in the world. Our convention was not like other denominational conventions where delegates work on and vote on resolutions. The NACC was simply a time of fellowship and worship. At its best, it was a gathering of old friends and a special time of praise to our Savior. But there was a downside which always bothered me. You see, restaurant and store owners, I found out, hated it when we came to town because too many Christians were too cheap. We did not tip well. We refused to use or tip the porters, and we would prefer to walk than pay a taxi cab or to haul us across town. Maybe we were saving a few bucks, but what does it say to the workers who depend on guests to make a living? Think about this. The easiest place to cut back in our budget is to withhold our offering to church, isn't it? The money we give voluntarily and under no obligation can be used to pay a bill from a creditor who does demand payment within 30 days. So we mistakenly think we are hurting no one when we do this, and God will understand we need to pay our bills. However, withholding our offering, no matter how big or small it is, means a missionary we support may not get the full amount we promised to send, so he will need to cut back on his outreach or not buy the groceries he needs to feed his family. And it will mean the church will have to tighten their belt to make sure all our obligations are met, and we will not be able to increase salaries or do more programs. You see, being stingy is more than being tight or frugal. It can lead to hurting others. Well, finally, the overall attitude James is talking about is spending. Spending. For James chapter 2, verses 15 and 16 has already asked us, suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? There must be a balance in our Christian lives between helping with material and spiritual needs. The example of the early church shows, according to Acts chapter 4, verse 34, there were no needy persons among them. And the reason was they gave to anyone as he had need. It appears part of the function of the first congregations was to make sure everyone had all they needed. Doesn't that sound better than worrying about some of the things which take up so much of our time in meetings and programs? It wasn't a matter of knowing everyone's business, and it wasn't a matter of criticizing or comparing each family's income and how they spent their money. Rather, it was a result of heartfelt compassion for each other. Acts chapter 4, verses 34 and 35 indicate the money was given to the apostles, who then distributed the funds to those in need. Individual privacy, in other words, was maintained within the church. No one stood up on Sunday morning and said, we're going to take a special offering for the Smiths because they are having problems making enough money to feed their kids and pay their bills. And Acts chapter 5 verse 4 tells us you could give or keep as you pleased. No one made you give, and it was all right if you had certain possessions. James said, in a sense, you all know this, don't act like everyone else acts. Be generous in your giving. But we should also remember paying money to the church does not get us out of our primary responsibility. Something they can pay the preacher, they can buy the programs, they can purchase results. However, the real bottom line is the best offering you can give is yourself. Look once again at what James wrote in verse 6. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who was not opposing you. Could it be he is talking about more than physically hurting someone? Could it be when we do not tell others the good news we are condemning and killing innocent people? I've told the story of Randy Rogers several times before, but it bears repeating here because it fits what James is saying, and the story still haunts me today. Randy and I were together in school from kindergarten through high school. Now, we weren't close friends. We did not hang out at each other's house or do things after school together, but we knew each other, and we were often in the same activities and school programs. He was the drum major in the marching band while I played, and we both worked together on various high school plays and musicals. We were friendly toward each other, but by our senior year, Randy had changed. While I was becoming more active in church stuff, he was becoming more active at parties. Rumors were often spread on Monday about how drunk he got over the weekend. We both enrolled at Miami University, but did not even consider rooming together. We didn't know each other that well. In fact, Randy entered a dorm across campus from where I was staying, so I did not even try to contact him. To be honest, I never even thought about the fact that he was there at school. But shortly after school started, we had a dinner at the Christian Campus House, and I was shocked to enter the house and see Randy sitting there. Well, we said hello, and he told me how he'd been baptized over the summer. After a little small talk, he finally asked, why didn't you tell me about Jesus? I could not answer. And fortunately, someone else came up to Randy and started to talk to him. I never saw Randy after that evening. I lost touch with him again, but a few years ago I heard sometime in the 1980s he was in Mexico, caught a virus, and died. Verse 6 should haunt us. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who are not opposing you. Let's not let the opportunity pass us by again.